Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. Boy, when we met last week, National Signing Day was in the books, and we thought, well, it's going to be pretty quiet for SMU and recruiting overall. But nope, Monday night kicked off Super Bowl week. Well, it kicked off SMU's 2024 recruiting efforts this spring, at least, in a huge way. We're going to get to that. We're also going to cover the big transfer addition that SMU got and talk a little bit about why SMU is truly recruiting at a Power 5 level now with its recent run, both in the high school ranks and in the transfer portal. So let's dive right in. SMU Monday night picked up a 4-star 2024 commitment from Dallas South Oak Cliff athlete Jamyri Cauley. They call him the Wildman. Well, he had SMU fans going wild. Kind of a surprise commitment. Hadn't told anyone that he was going to be making a decision anytime soon, but said he wanted to put on for his hometown and go ahead and do that at SMU, announcing the news on Twitter. This is a massive pickup for SMU. And I mentioned kicking off the efforts in the 2024 class this year at least. That's because SMU also has quarterback commit Tyler Aronson. This is a big, big deal. SMU now has 2 commitments in the class of 2024 with at least one recruiting service ranking each of them as 4-star prospects. So you have Tyler, who kicked off the class as the quarterback commit and is coming off a really impressive season at Vero Beach. He's poised to get ready for his senior year now and go down that path. But the big news really is that continued pipeline from South Oak Cliff. It started with Kevin Henry Jennings, the quarterback, who came in and played well as a true freshman for SMU this year. And then you also have Randy Reese and Abdul Muhammad in the class of 2023. Well, now SMU has a 2024 commit in Wildman, who ranks in the top 150 overall prospects on the On3 consensus. He's the nation's number 11 overall athlete. He had offers from Baylor, Texas, Texas A&M, TCU, Georgia, Mississippi State, and others. And let's kind of run this recruitment back here for a second before we talk about where he fits in. 6'1", 210, coming off a junior season where he had a touchdown catch in the state championship game. I was there watching South Oak Cliff win their second straight state championship. He kind of burst onto the scene as a sophomore. I think he had around 900 yards receiving, almost double-digit touchdown catches as a sophomore, and then plays a little bit more defense this year. Kind of gets some snaps taken away from him on offense, and still was able in the playoffs to make some plays. He missed, I believe, a game or two. I remember seeing him at one of their earlier playoff games. I believe it was against Melissa. Could be wrong on that, but he was not able to go. Returned in time to play for the state championship and had a touchdown catch in that one. He is a just huge man. I mean, he stands 6'1". He's not tall in that sense, but he is built like a truck. And so for him coming in, this is a recruitment that you got to give credit to Keenan Hall, Danny West, Scott Natty, so many others involved in this one, because Wildman is one where you can never really get too much out of him. So for them to have the relationships to go ahead and get him on board is huge for him. They have a long way to go, 10 months until he could sign on national letter of intent in the early signing period. But this is half the battle. And sometimes we hear about prospects that are so close, and never end up committing. Well, they did get Wildman on board. He is a huge, huge pickup. Let's run you guys back. And we covered this junior day that SMU had, or well, I guess it could really be considered a sophomore day, where SMU had some of the top talent in the area on campus. And they had them there to kind of, take them through what it would be like if they all got together and stayed home and played for SMU. And Wildman was one of those prospects who was on campus. And I feel like you look back at that day and it came in November, and they got them all together on campus. I mean, you look at the group that was on campus. It was five-star edge Colin Simmons. It was key corner target William Speedy Nettles, uh, McKinney's Xavier Philsame, Brian Jackson, both teammates of Keldrick Luster, by the way. You had four-star safety Aaron Flowers and cornerback Alex Rogers, Harry Stewart, a key running back target who's a four-star, Kewan Lacey out of Lancaster, and Brandon Booker out of DeSoto. Wildman was one of those guys, and he has probably visited SMU. I think it's pretty safe to say he's visited SMU more than any other campus. So this isn't right now, I would say, one of those ones where you sit back and say this is a one-off commitment. They got him on campus and had him feeling good. This is one where, I'm not even sure he made a visit in January. He might have popped over to campus at one point, but that November visit when they had them up there taking pictures in the all black uniforms and really just being together as a 2024 group of elite prospects from around Dallas, that's what caught his eye. And you go back even farther, and he was on campus for junior day, a junior day, but a sophomore day, so to speak, back in April 2022. This is a guy that SMU never stopped recruiting through the coaching change. You look back at the coaching staff, like a Scott Natty, who was here through the change, who kind of continued to recruit Wildman, even when he was with Sonny Dykes, and then Keenan Hall and Danny West come in and are just so key in this one as well. SMU has continued to really build these relationships. And, I don't know when it comes to Wildman what it's going to end up being, if he is going to stick or not. There are going to be schools that do not give up. There are going to be schools like Texas and Texas A&M and especially TCU that come hard after Wildman. I mean, he is a really impressive prospect. But SMU has the relationships to get him committed and on board. And you see Rashee Rice tweeting at him, "Take my number. You're a dog. Stay locked in." This is a big, big deal. And I mean, you just got to give credit all around. And this is kind of one of those moments where you sit back and you kind of celebrate a commitment like this without a doubt. I mean, a huge, huge, huge addition, a top 150 overall prospect in the country on the On3 consensus. This is a massive pickup, a huge boost to momentum, and to hang in there in a recruitment like this and just keep getting him around on campus. He was at multiple games this fall. You've got to give kudos to the staff. So now it's about keeping him on board. It's a dead period, so he can't go anywhere. And then it'll open back up in March. He'll be back on campus there pretty quickly. And you just keep recruiting him, and you keep recruiting him like he's uncommitted. And just don't change what you're doing, because that's how you got here. So to get Wildman on board, massive, massive land, and a sign that SMU's continuing to recruit at a Power 5 level in many aspects. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the back half of the podcast. But as far as how he fits, he plays wide receiver and defense for SOC. A lot of people see him as a big wide receiver. I think he could be even kind of a shorter, Y hybrid tight end. I think if he stays on offense, he's a mismatch problem. I mean, he's got athleticism for days. I mean, he really is one of those impressive prospects that you see physically and running around out there. And you can see why so many people do want him on defense to play linebacker and run around and maybe rush the passer a little bit and get after the quarterback and just be one of those versatile chess pieces on defense, because he has this big body that he will only, I think, pack on a little bit more mass. So I would say right now for SMU, looks like kind of one of those big wide receivers, a matchup problem. They can move all over and just be a versatile piece on offense. But if he ends up growing out of his current frame, I think he's got a chance to end up on defense. But I mean, it's just a huge, huge addition. Somebody who wants to stay close to home. We'll see if it sticks, of course. But this isn't a decision that I think came out of the blue for us, but obviously made calls right after the fact and started checking around, and this is one where his family's very much on board. There is a lot of respect and love for what SMU is doing, and for him to stay home and stay close to home is a big factor in this one. So SMU now has a war on its hand to keep him on board. But man, what a key pickup for SMU to get Wildman on board. And I'm excited to keep covering SOC. They're a great team, great program. Kyle Ward and Coach Todd, just do an unreal job over there. So we will obviously be going out to SOC to see Wildman and get his thoughts. He plays things fairly close to the vest, but gonna try to get out there and chat with him a little bit more about what this commitment means to him and how it came to be from his angle. But by checking around, this is not something he took lightly, and he kind of did it in Wildman fashion, just kind of put it out there with this graphic and a short message and let it fly. So huge commitment, number 2 for SMU in the class of 2024. SMU now sits in the top 25 rankings for the class of 2024. It's early on, but they do trail just behind Texas A&M, but are a few spots ahead of TCU right now with 2 commitments on board. So Rhett Lashlee and this whole staff continuing to show their recruiting chops are very much there. Another big pickup for SMU, Miami offensive line transfer Jakai Clark. He announced his commitment right after Wildman. I had actually gotten wind of it late afternoon, I would say. I texted Jakai after he tweeted out change of plans. I said, is this a decision? Do you need an edit? Let me know. And he said, yep, I do. He ended up using one that the coaches put together for him, but he said he was locking it in with SMU. He reunites with his former offensive line coach, Garen Justice, who was his position coach at Miami, where he started 39 games for the Hurricanes. He started a full season, I think it was a year or so, 2 years ago, at right guard. He also spent plenty of time as the team's starting center. This is a huge pickup for SMU, beating out LSU, Missouri, West Virginia. He had just told us he was going to take visits there in March, but instead, we kind of set on the board. SMU's hoping that he would lock it in and not take those visits. And sure enough, he ends up doing just that. Big deal for SMU to get this piece. And one that will obviously challenge right away for the starting center job and compete with Branson Hickman, but does give you a little bit more versatility when it comes to that left guard, right guard spot. And you can now pencil him in as a starter. I think out of those 3 positions, you can absolutely pencil him in as a starter. That's what he's coming here to do. I would think the early bet right now is for him to be the starting center for SMU. So Branson Hickman now has a battle on his hands, and we'll see kind of how that goes between those 2 guys, because you do have Justin Osborne returning. So he's got that right guard position where he's really battled to secure that. Then at left guard, you have Ben Sparks, who they really like, but you also brought in Logan Parr from Texas. So now you have kind of what we saw with Jalen Thomas last year in a sense, but more so on the interior of this offensive line, where, all right, if Ben Sparks can't steal the job, will it be Logan Parr? If not, could Jakai Clark slide in there and steal that job? If they want to move Justin Osborne around a little, could that open something up at right guard? Then you have Branson Hickman. Could he battle and impress enough to stick in there? I don't know. We'll see. There are limitations at times for Branson, but Jakai Clark is a big, squatty center that it just is very natural that he's going to slide in, I think, at that starting center job. So some competition on the way. This team needed that one more piece along the offensive line, especially along the interior. After adding Hiron White and PJ Williams on the edge, you have Logan Parr and Jakai Clark coming in on the interior, as well as your trio of offensive line signees in the class of 2023. So the offensive line depth completely revamped. I do think the staff would love to find somebody in the May window and bring them in for an additional piece of depth, because right now you have this group that I would say is in a good spot. I would still say you want that one more piece, whether it's somebody that can play tackle, guard, those 4 positions. I think that's what you look for, but especially tackle, maybe a backup left tackle, to kind of help Marcus Bryant. But this offensive line is now in a great spot, I would say, for sure. You missed out on Drake Metcalf, who ends up going to UCF, but you added two nice interior pieces in Jakai Clark and Logan Parr now. That gives Garen Justice plenty of new faces to work with along the interior that can, replace some of the guys that have left. So big news for SMU to get Jakai Clark. LSU viewed him as somebody who could step in and play center guard. Don't know if he would have started right away for LSU, but he would have, at the very least, been able to challenge and be in the mix to start and play a good bit for the Tigers because they do have some concerns along the interior of that offensive line. As far as Missouri and West Virginia, they were kind of the same thing. They wanted him as a versatile piece. I would say the starting path for both of those teams would have been a little bit easier than it would have been at LSU just with some of the depth they have. But Jakai Clark, 39 games started for the Hurricanes. When you're looking at risk and you're looking at factoring that in with what you're going to get, you look at what Jakai Clark put together, especially the last couple of years at Miami, kind of a mixed bag. I mean, there's people that certainly from the Miami side don't, see this as a massive loss. But at the end of the day, he's somebody that started 39 games for the Hurricanes across two coaching staffs, or maybe even three coaching staffs. And, that says a lot. I mean, he started as a true freshman. And then, Rhett Lashlee and Garen Justice and them came in, and you can just see it that they, spanned this whole, change in scheme and offensive staff, and then started for Mario Cristobal. So, yes, they brought in another center in the UCF transfer, but this is somebody that can really impact SMU's starting offensive line. I think when you look at this group from left to right, Marcus Bryant, whoever emerges, cream rises to the top of that left guard spot with Ben Sparks, Logan Parr, Jakai Clark, Branson Hickman. Then you have Justin Osborne and kind of a slew of guys behind him. Then you have Hiron White with PJ Williams backing him up. This is, I would say, the most talented, probably front starting five SMU is going to have had in a minute. It's also going to be one of the ones where I think the competition is now at that level that you want it to be at. Ben Sparks last year was just a little bit away from starting and competing. And we've seen guys that just haven't turned the corner as much. Dalton Perdue kind of comes to mind, but he's played a little bit of ball. He's now your third string right tackle in all likelihood. So what a group that SMU has put together up front. They're going to look for one more. And that'll be obviously big news if they can get just one more piece to factor in to that offensive line. And I think in the run game, that's where Jakai Clark is going to help the most. SMU did not start off the season well running the football. They found their groove for the most part late in the season, obviously with Tyler Levine's emergence and even Kamar Wheaton emerging. But at the end of the day, this is a move that I think helps in the run game the most. Getting Jakai Clark in there, a big body that can push some people around, especially at the AAC level. This should really, pay dividends in the run game, especially in my mind. So SMU picks up another Miami transfer. That is huge news for the Mustangs to get him on board, and he will not take any of those visits that he was talking about taking. Finally, I just want to kind of start by saying this staff has come in and I feel like changed the mindset of the recruiting efforts at SMU. And what I mean by that is when you look at the players that they've brought in over the this past transfer cycle, every single one of them, you see it. And what I mean by that is you have starters, you have a captain in a Jonathan McGill, you have players that you're familiar with and know what you're getting in the Miami and the Liberty transfers. You have high-end developmental guys like PJ Williams, a former top 100 prospect, Jalen Davis Robinson, one of the fastest guys in his entire recruiting class, coming in with 4 years left of eligibility. and you have it at a double-digit level, and most of them are for multiple years. You have Hiron White, you have Chris Megginson, you have Jakai Clark, just off the top of my head. So, just give me, a little bit of grace if I forgot somebody with 1 year that can really help SMU's Jordan Miller, that can really help SMU's 2023 season reach its full potential. And that's how they've changed the mindset with the transfer portal this cycle. Last cycle, it was a lot of filling depth. They took some risks, some guys that were injured that didn't pan out. Bo Corrales, for example. You had other players that really didn't play at their previous stop and didn't have buzz around them to play. And, like a Cam Allen who could pan out, maybe, but didn't have much buzz for him to play. There were questions around David Abiara. There's still questions around him. Now you have a group that I really feel like is all players who they feel really good about. And they've turned away some to a fault. A Kane Barong from Notre Dame, very skilled 4-star tight end, former 4-star. But how would he look, coming off his injury? Was he good enough to play right away and impact this upcoming season? They ended up just going in a different direction. And in the high school recruiting efforts, I feel the same. They trusted their board, and the class was pretty much done in June. They had one more right before the season, Jamyri and Carroll. They did senior evaluations and found Kevin Allen. They had Lamadrick Spencer very high on their board. If he can figure out academics, he'll sign and become official at some point. And then they had Adam Moore, who they recruited and had on campus in the spring, kept recruiting him, went and saw him this fall, kept themselves in the race, and they beat out Syracuse and others in the end to get him. Now you look ahead to 2024, and you have two highly touted prospects who have offers from all over the country. And that sets the momentum and tone for this 2024 class. I go back to what we were talking about with Wildman and that group that was on campus in November to visit SMU. They're probably not going to get half of those players. I mean, Colin Simmons, he's not going to end up. Alex Flowers and Aaron Rodgers, or Aaron Flowers and Alex Rodgers. That's what it is. Aaron Flowers and Alex Rodgers. They are certainly in position where they got to keep chipping away and they got to make up some ground. There's some other players in there that probably aren't going to end up at SMU. I think Brandon Booker, he did pick up that Texas A&M offer. We talked about that when previewing the 2024 class on an earlier podcast. It's a big offer for him. That's going to be tough to, overcome. But there are players on that list that are realistic. Speedy Williams or Speedy Nettles, the Dallas Christian corner, who's a borderline 4-star prospect who looked really good for True Buzz Gang. Harry Stewart, the Frisco Centennial running back, who's ranked as a 4-star on the On3 consensus. He's been on campus a ton. There are others that could very well end up at SMU. But the mindset on this 2024 class, and I think this is the progression of this staff, who, when you look at the staff that's assembled, I would say a lot of them are built on being recruiters. And that's not a slap in the face in terms of their coaching ability. We know Rhett Lashlee can coordinate offenses. Scott Simons did not forget how to coach defense last year. He was dealt a bad hand. There were some days that they were far worse than they should have been. But historically, he's been a part of teams that can play some defense. And he showed that at Liberty as well. And there are other coaches that have developed guys. Rob Likens has developed wide receivers. Rashee Rice, I was with him last 2 weekends ago in Miami. He said his best wide receivers coach was Rob Likens. That is the guy that got the most out of him, as the guy he was closest with, and he had a Bolitnikoff type season because of it. Keenan Hall is one of the original Dallas guys. Casey Woods, built that UAB program up. It's recruiting coordinator at Missouri. There are other guys that have been recruiting at a very high level. You know, the new addition, Maurice Crum, talked to a lot of people. A lot of people like what he's going to bring to the table as a recruiter. This staff is going to set its goals extremely high in 2024, in my opinion. I think you look at the group they've offered, you look at the group of guys they continue to recruit, they're picking up offers, they're starting to get high levels of interest. You look at Zach Smith, the Red Oak linebacker, he's now picked up, I think, 4 more offers since SMU offered, and has really blown up. But SMU is probably going to be a factor in that one. And with the facility upgrades, with the potential to join a Power 5 conference, SMU is already recruiting at a Power 5 conference level. And they're trying to flex those muscles, whether it be relationships, whether it be NIL, they're doing it all. And talking with a bunch of sources, they're kind of done trying to take some developmental risks when it comes to recruiting. If they don't think somebody can play, they're not going to take that player. And look, there might be a guy here or there down the line where they might need to take, and it might make me scratch my head. It might make fans scratch their heads. But that's when it comes to, you got to trust staff evals. You got to trust what their plan is. But at the end of the day, this staff is shooting very, very high in 2024. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of that class Sonny Dykes kind of had put together before he ended up leaving for TCU. That's the type of level SMU's shooting for right now. They're shooting for those highly touted prospects who they really think can play. And so far, so good. It's paying off with 2 really highly touted commits. Next month, when it comes to March, they're going to be heavy on the junior days, heavy on visitors. That's when they're going to really turn this thing up into overdrive a little bit more as far as the high school recruiting. They spent a lot of time out visiting prospects when it came to continuing to recruit transfers. They still had to recruit Jakai, Nick Jackson, others this cycle. And then, of course, Adam Moore, they had to go see. But they spent a lot of January going around and building relationships at high schools and continuing to do that, continuing to prioritize them, because that's what they really want to pay off in 2024. And so far, they're very much recruiting at a Power 5 level. If you look at the last 2 months, you look around at some of the classes, and people have asked me this question on the board. Well, do you think where would SMU rank if they were in a Power 5 conference? Well, it's very hard to answer that question because you have the fact that they aren't in a Power 5 conference. So I can't just sit here and assume that, well, X player would have come to SMU if it was in a Power 5 conference. How would that positively impact players' decisions when it comes to whether or not they'll jump on board with SMU? That's kind of the tough question to answer. How much would that have changed? I like to think it would have changed Adrian Wilson's mind, the Keller Central safety that ended up going to Washington State. Maybe if SMU is in a Power 5 conference, he says, you know what? They don't have a safeties coach, but defense coordinator is going to be my safeties coach. I don't know him that well, but I like what I've heard. And they're in a Power 5 conference. I'm going to go there. We've seen some other guys who've just been so close through the years that end up just going to a Power 5 school. Does Jonathan McGill go all the way to Stanford originally the first time around if SMU is in a Power 5 conference? Those are just a ton of hypotheticals. But the fact is, SMU is recruiting at a mid-Power 5 level. And I mean that in the sense of, if they were in any of these Power 5 conferences, they would be in the middle of the pack. Okay, you can have the impact if they're in the SEC. The staff is recruiting at a very strong level. They could be in the middle of the pack because they'd have the SEC logo behind them. You could assume and think that they would be middle of the pack in the SEC recruiting-wise. They're in the Pac-12. Well, we already know they're assembling groups of players between high school and transfers that is very much middle of the road, Pac-12 again, how would the high school recruiting change if they were in that conference? They could be maybe even a little bit higher. But this is a group that is no doubt, I feel like, showing why SMU should be in a Power 5 conference. Their pitch, their relationships, the school, has NIL behind it. The school has facilities. Just kind of talking with recruits that have picked up offers, they really seem to like the staff. And for the most part, they're offering guys that have a good bit of recruiting attention. So I'm really high on what this staff is doing. SMU is recruiting at a Power 5 level. And if they can, keep this thing going, it really is trending to be teed up for an impressive run when they do get that Power 5 conference invite. Because I do think, between the Pac-12 looking to expand, I think SMU is still in a very, very strong position at this point. If they do expand, to land an invite, I think it's the right move for the Pac-12. I think you're seeing some of the guys who really, really pay close attention to conference realignment notice that. And I think SMU is, between the coaching staff, between facilities, NIL, they are investing to go that route. And honestly, it really starts with recruiting at that level, and SMU is doing just that. So we'll have plenty more coverage for you guys. We're going to do our mailbag podcast later this week, as well as our next position preview for spring practice. We will catch you guys on another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Please hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Get us to 500 and beyond. Appreciate all you guys who have subscribed to ontheponyexpress.com. Check out the site for details on our subscriber meetup Thursday night here in Dallas. Check that out. If you subscribe, you can come on. If you're a subscriber, bring a friend. If they subscribe, you get a free month. So please head out to the subscriber meetup. Details are at ontheponyexpress.com. We will catch you guys there. It'll be a blast. Hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the podcast, and we will catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening.